This isn't the kind of story you tell if you want to be believed. I know how it sounds already. Delirious, paranoid, exaggerated. And maybe you'll think that's all this is. The sleep-deprived ramblings of someone who spent too long on the road. But I swear to you, every word I'm about to say is true. It starts with a door. Just a door. You'd think that's harmless enough, right? But when I saw it, I knew in my bones it didn't belong. Room 6. If you've ever stayed at a roadside motel, you probably know the feeling. Fluorescent buzz of the sign outside, scratchy sheets, the smell of mildew creeping from the bathroom tiles. I'd stayed in dozens of places like that. Forgettable, disposable, all blurring into one. But this place carved itself into me. And room 6 most of all left a mark I can't scrub out. I need to warn you before I get into the details. If you've ever come across a door that shouldn't exist, don't touch it. Don't knock. Don't even stare too long. It notices when you do. The motel itself was unremarkable, at least from the outside. A single row of rooms, the parking lot littered with oil stains and cigarette butts. I was just looking for a bed to collapse into, that's all. But when I asked for a room, the clerk hesitated. His eyes flickered sideways like he was checking if someone was listening, before handing me a key. I didn't understand the look in his eyes until later. By then, it was too late. Room 6 isn't supposed to exist. Not on the map. Not in the registry, not even in the clerk's memory. When I tried to ask him about it again, he swore I was mistaken. He told me the rooms went from 1 to 12, but there was no 6. He laughed at me. Laughed like I was the crazy one. But I have the key. I still keep it, even though I know I should have thrown it into the ocean. A tarnished little piece of metal with the number 6 stamped into the tag. Proof that I wasn't hallucinating. Do you understand what I'm telling you? This isn't a ghost story. It isn't some urban legend passed around a campfire. This is real, and I'm not the first one who's been inside that room. I found evidence. Names, notes, desperate scribbles left behind by people who were there before me. And if I hadn't gotten out, if getting out is even the right way to describe what happened, you wouldn't be hearing this now. I can't promise this story has an ending that will make sense. I can't even promise you that I escaped. But I can promise you this. Once you hear what happened in room 6, you'll never look at motels the same way again. Because once you know about the door, it knows about you. The night I found the motel, I had been driving for nearly 10 hours. My eyes burned from staring at the endless stretch of highway, and my back ached from sitting too long in the same slouched position. Every gas station coffee I choked down was fighting to keep me awake. But the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind only that hollow exhaustion you feel when your body is running on fumes. I wasn't looking for anything special, just a bed, a shower, and maybe a vending machine dinner. I saw the neon sign long before I reached it, flickering like it was gasping its last breath. A single word glowed against the black stretch of desert night. Motel. That's all it said. No brand, no name, just that. From the highway, the place looked like every other roadside stop I'd ever pulled into. Peeling paint, a cracked parking lot littered with empty cans and cigarette butts, and a soda machine humming loudly beside the lobby door. Normal. Forgettable. Exactly what I needed. But the second I stepped out of my car, I noticed something strange. The air was still. Completely still. No wind, no buzzing insects, no faint hum of traffic in the distance. Just silence pressing in on me, heavy and unnatural. I shook it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that the road was playing tricks on me. The lobby was lit by a single fluorescent bulb that buzzed and flickered, painting everything in that sickly hospital shade of white. Behind the counter sat a man who looked half asleep, his thinning hair combed carefully over a bald spot, a cigarette smoldering in the ashtray beside him. "Need a room?" he asked without looking up. His voice was gravelly, the kind of voice that comes from years of smoke and whiskey. "Yeah, just for the night," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. He tapped something into his computer, an old, yellowed monitor that hummed louder than the lights overhead. His eyes flicked to me for a second and then back to the screen. That's when his hand hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, but I noticed it. Room 6, he muttered finally, handing me a tarnished brass key on a plastic tag. I took it automatically, but the number made me pause. Room 6? I asked, my voice flat with exhaustion. His eyes snapped up, wide for just a second before he smoothed his face into something unreadable. Yeah, room 6, he said. Right down the hall. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I should have left it at that. I should have gone to the room, collapsed on the bed, and slept until morning. But something about his reaction nagged at me. As I turned to leave, I asked casually, "You get a lot of people staying here?" He chuckled under his breath. "More than you'd think. Folks passing through mostly. Drivers like you. People who won't be remembered in the morning." I stopped. "What's that supposed to mean?" His smile widened, but he didn't answer. When I stepped back into the night air, the neon sign sputtered again, bathing the parking lot in a dull red glow. I followed the row of doors, counting them automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then my eyes fell on the tarnished brass number. 6. The door looked no different from the others. Same paint, same cheap metal handle, same heavy curtain drawn over the inside window. But standing there, key in hand, I felt that same heavy stillness pressing against me. I shook it off again, muttering to myself that I was just overtired. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened with a groan, the smell of dust and stale air rushing out to greet me. Inside, it looked ordinary. Bed, nightstand, TV, bathroom door cracked open. Forgettable. Harmless. Still, I couldn't shake the memory of the clerk's pause, the look in his eyes when he said the number out loud. Almost like he hadn't meant to. Almost like he'd slipped. I dropped my bag on the bed, sat down heavily, and tried to laugh at myself. "It's just a room," I whispered. "Just another motel room." But I didn't believe it, not even for a second. When I woke up the next morning, my body ached from the kind of sleep that isn't restful, just heavy. My head throbbed like I'd been drinking, though I hadn't touched a drop. I thought maybe the road was catching up to me. But when I stepped out of the room into the hallway, I noticed something strange. I decided to count the doors again. Something about them had been nagging at me since last night. The numbers went as expected. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But when I looked down the road toward the lobby, I saw the next number clearly stenciled. 7. I froze. I turned back. There, right beside me, was the tarnished brass plate marked 6. The numbers shouldn't have worked that way. 5, then 6, then 7, that's how it should have gone. But the layout of the building didn't make sense. From one angle, it looked like there was no space for the door to exist at all. From another, it looked squeezed into the wall like an afterthought, as if someone had carved out a section of reality and patched the door in. I stared longer than I meant to. My eyes started to blur, and for a moment I swore the number on the plate shifted, as though the 6 wanted to peel itself into something else. I blinked hard, and it was just a 6 again. When I stepped back inside, everything looked wrong in its own right. The first thing I noticed was how spotless it was. Not clean in the way of a room that's been scrubbed by housekeeping, but sterile, untouched, like it had never been lived in. The air carried no scent, no bleach, no dust, no lingering perfume of previous guests. Just nothing. It made my skin crawl. The bedspread was tucked in too tightly, the corners sharp as if they'd been cut with a blade. The nightstand sat slightly too far from the bed, just enough that you'd have to lean uncomfortably to reach it. The lamp was crooked on its base, but when I tried to adjust it, it wouldn't budge, like it had been glued in place. And then there was the mirror. It stretched from floor to ceiling, slightly taller than me, taller than anyone would reasonably need. When I stood in front of it, I looked distorted, elongated, my head too narrow, my arms stretched thin. I forced myself to look away. The curtains were worse. heavy and stiff, nailed into the wall at both edges. I tugged at them, but they wouldn't move an inch. No light seeped through from the outside, not even the faint glow of the neon sign I'd seen the night before. It was a room designed to look normal at first glance. But the longer I stayed, the more I noticed how every detail bent just slightly wrong, like an imitation of a motel room made by someone who had only ever read about them. I sat on the bed, listening to the silence. At first it was just that, silence. Then I caught it. The faintest hiss of air moving through the vent above the bathroom door. I almost ignored it, until I heard something buried in the static of sound. A voice. It was faint, broken up by the rattle of the old metal, but I know what I heard. My name. At first I thought I'd imagined it, my mind exhausted and foggy, making patterns where none existed. But then it came again, clearer this time, syllables dragging through the vent like a sigh. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. The voice was flat, almost mechanical, as though whoever spoke was repeating it without understanding. Name. Just once. Then silence. I shot up from the bed, my skin crawling, heart hammering. I yanked open the bathroom door, half expecting to find someone standing in the shower, whispering through the vent. But the bathroom was empty, spotless, and somehow even colder than the bedroom. I stood there for a long moment, listening, waiting. The vent rattled again with the hum of the air system, but the voice didn't return. I told myself I was hallucinating. That exhaustion was making me hear things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside that vent had learned my name. And worse, that it was waiting for me to listen again. I backed out slowly, refusing to take my eyes off the mirror as I crossed the room. My reflection followed, distorted grin twitching at the edges of my vision. I sat on the bed again, clutching the key still in my pocket, and whispered to myself, "It's just a room. Just another room." But deep down I knew I was lying. This wasn't a place for rest, it was a place that shouldn't exist. That night I told myself I'd keep the lights on. It was a childish decision, the kind you make when you're young and afraid of the dark, but the silence of the room had started pressing down on me again, heavier with every passing minute. The lamp gave off a dull yellow glow that didn't quite reach the corners of the room. Shadows bled together there, rippling whenever I blinked too long. I thought maybe I could distract myself. I grabbed the remote from the nightstand, pressed the power button, and waited for the TV to sputter to life. At first it was just static, white noise filling the air, its hiss grating on my nerves. Then the static shifted. For a moment the snow blurred, pulling together like iron filings dragged by a magnet. My eyes widened as the screen sharpened into something that looked like letters just for an instant. A single word burned through the haze as though it had been waiting for me to turn the TV on. Stay. The word dissolved back into static before I could be sure I'd actually seen it. My hand shook as I clicked the TV off, the screen going black, but I kept staring at my own faint reflection in the glass, waiting for it to move without me. I tried to breathe, to calm myself down, when the lights began to flicker. At first, it was random, little stutters, a brief dimming here and there. But then I realized it wasn't random at all. The lamp on the nightstand blinked once, then again, 1, 2, 3. It was like a heartbeat. No, it was like a countdown. I sat frozen, counting with it as the flickers grew slower, heavier, deliberate. My chest tightened with every pause, every flash of light. 4, 5, 6. By the time I whispered 7 under my breath, the lamp clicked off entirely, leaving me in the dark, and that's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the door, loud and deliberate. I jumped, my pulse roaring in my ears. I stared at the handle, waiting for it to turn, but it never did. I forced myself up, inching toward the door with every ounce of dread pressing down on me. When I finally yanked it open, the hallway stretched out before me, empty. No footsteps, no shadows retreating, Just silence. I leaned out, peering both ways. Room 5 on my left, room 7 on my right. The numbers clear, unmoving. I turned back to my room and my stomach dropped. The brass number on my door was gone. The plate was blank, the metal smooth and featureless, like the number had been scraped away. I slammed the door shut and grabbed the phone from the nightstand. I dialed the lobby, desperate for another human voice. It rang once, twice, then the clerk picked up. "Motel front desk," he said. His voice was calm, like nothing in the world was wrong. This is room 6, I said, the words tumbling out of me. "There's something wrong with this room." Someone knocked on my door. Silence. "Hello?" I asked. The line crackled. The clerk's voice came back, sharper this time. "Sir, we don't have a room 6. I froze. I'm in it right now," I insisted, gripping the receiver so tightly my knuckles went white. "No," he said firmly. "Please stop calling. This is a prank. We don't have a room 6. We never have." Before I could argue, the line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the floor. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct told me to leave, to run out of the motel, get in my car, and never look back. So I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and yanked the door open. The hallway stretched before me, sterile under the dim lights. I walked fast, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the silence. I passed room 5, then room 4, then 3. And when I turned the corner, my stomach dropped into ice. There it was again. Room 6. I hadn't turned the wrong way. I hadn't doubled back. I knew I hadn't. But the hallway looped, pulling me back to the same door no matter which way I went. I tried again, and again, and again. Every time I found myself standing in front of that same tarnished brass plate, the number 6 gleaming faintly in the dim light. The door waiting for me. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood, my breath ragged, tears stinging at the corners of my eyes. I whispered to myself over and over, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." But when I stepped back, I noticed the doorknob was already turning on its own. I didn't remember falling asleep, but at some point the darkness pressed too heavy and dragged me under. When I woke, the room felt colder, sharper, as though the air itself had grown teeth. My body ached with the kind of exhaustion that sleep can't cure. That's when I noticed something bulging slightly beneath the mattress. At first, I thought it was just lumpy padding, the cheap kind motels always use. But when I ran my hand underneath, my fingers brushed against something solid, smooth like leather. My heart pounded as I pulled it free. It was a book. The cover was cracked and worn, bound in faded green leather that smelled faintly of mildew. No title, no markings. Just weight heavy in my hands. I opened it. The first page was filled with neat handwriting. A name, a date. Below it, 2 words written in careful, almost ceremonial script. Checked in, never checked out. I frowned, flipping to the next page. Another name. Another date. The same words beneath. Page after page followed the same pattern. Hundreds of entries, maybe more, stretching back decades. Some of the names had been smudged, faded, as if someone had tried to erase them. Others were written so firmly the ink had bled through to the other side. But all of them ended the same way. Checked in, never checked out. The room tilted around me. I had to set the book down before I dropped it. My fingers trembled as I flipped further ahead, toward the more recent entries. That's when I saw it. My name. Written in bold, unmistakable strokes. The date listed was tomorrow. I couldn't breathe. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment I told myself it wasn't possible, that someone was playing a sick joke, that maybe the clerk had filled it in after seeing my ID. But that didn't explain the other pages. The ones written long before I was born. I stared at the entry, my name staring back at me, and for the first time since I arrived, I realized just how deep I was in something I couldn't explain. I turned more pages. frantically searching, desperate for anything that wasn't just a death sentence disguised as a ledger. That's when I noticed the pattern breaking. Not all the entries were neat. Some of the pages had been scrawled in desperation, handwriting crooked and panicked. One read, "Don't sleep. It comes when you sleep." Another, "The door isn't a door, it's a mouth." The longer I flipped, the worse the messages became. "If you hear your name, don't answer. There is no outside." And one that nearly made me drop the book altogether. "The guest book knows you. Stop reading." I snapped the book shut, my hands slick with sweat. But the damage was already done. I sat there in the silence, the weight of it crushing me, and for the first time I felt like I wasn't just reading about the others. I was with them. Their voices, their panic, their last words had been preserved in those pages, and now my own fate had been written down too. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave, to get in my car and drive until the desert swallowed the motel behind me. But the memory of the looping hallway stopped me cold. There was nowhere to go. No escape. So instead I turned to you. Yeah, you, listening to this. Watching this. However you found it. You've stayed in places like this, haven't you? Anonymous motels, cheap stopovers where no one asks your name twice. Maybe you've walked down a hall and seen a door that didn't fit. Maybe you looked away before you thought too much about it. Good. Hold on to that instinct, because if you'd opened it, if you'd walked inside, you'd understand what I mean when I say it's not a room. It's something else, a trap. A net cast across the highways, waiting for the tired, the unwary, the disposable. And it doesn't let go. I forced myself to open the book again, one last time, because I had to know. If my name was there, maybe I'd see some clue, some way the others had fought back. Flipping through the last pages, I noticed something that chilled me deeper than the entries themselves. The ink on my name was fresh, wet. I could smudge it with my finger if I dared, and just below it, faintly traced like someone had only started to write. Another name, I recognized it. Yours. I slammed the book shut and shoved it back under the mattress, my heart racing so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. My throat burned with the urge to scream, but what good would it do? The walls were listening. I sat in the sterile silence, clutching my bag like it could protect me, waiting for the next impossibility to happen. And that's when the vent rattled again. My name whispered through the air, softer this time, almost tender, followed by another word, tomorrow. I told myself I'd stay awake. I repeated it like a mantra. Don't sleep. Don't give it a chance. But exhaustion has a way of breaking promises, and the hours crawled toward midnight like the second hand of a clock that wanted me to hear it. By the time the alarm on my phone buzzed 12ing, the room had already started to change. At first it was subtle. The lamp on the nightstand flickered, then burned brighter than before, spilling yellow light across the walls. Except the shadows didn't move the way they should have. They stretched long and thin, reaching across the ceiling like grasping fingers. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, the furniture wasn't where it had been. The bed, once against the wall, now sat at an angle toward the center of the room. The nightstand faced the door like it had been dragged by unseen hands. The TV was gone entirely, leaving only a black square burned into the wallpaper. I swore under my breath, my skin prickling with static. The mirror was worse. It loomed larger than I remembered, swallowing the wall entirely. I stood in front of it, staring at myself, only it wasn't myself. My reflection smiled. I wasn't smiling. My lips were cracked, trembling with fear, but in the glass my teeth were bared in a wide, unnatural grin. I stumbled backward, knocking into the crooked lamp. The reflection didn't follow. It leaned forward instead, pressing its palms against the glass. My stomach twisted as it mouthed words I couldn't hear. I bolted for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. No matter how hard I yanked, no matter how many times I slammed my shoulder against it, the door held fast. The brass plate gleamed faintly in the flickering light, the number 6 glowing like it was seared into the wood. The air grew heavier. That's when I heard the breathing. It came from the corner of the room, low and ragged like someone struggling for air. Slowly I turned. There was someone sitting on the edge of the bed. At least they looked like someone. Their shape flickered, breaking apart like bad reception. Body half there and half not. Their face was obscured by static, but I could make out the curve of a mouth, the hollow pits where eyes should have been. "They always come back," the figure rasped. Its voice sounded like it came through a broken speaker, each word crackling. My throat went dry. "Who?" "All of them. You. Me. The ones before." The figure raised its head, and for an instant I swore I recognized the face. Just a flash of familiarity, gone as quickly as it came. "You don't check out," it said. "No one ever checks out." I backed away until my shoulders hit the nailed curtains. The figure tilted its head like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. And then the mirror rippled. My reflection stepped out of it. It moved like me, dressed like me, but its grin stretched too wide, skin too smooth. It walked toward me with deliberate slowness, the way a predator might approach prey it knows can't escape. I pressed against the wall, panic clawing at my chest. The doppelganger stopped inches from my face, still grinning, and whispered in my own voice, "You're already part of it." The room tilted. The wall seemed to stretch outward, folding in ways geometry wasn't meant to bend. The ceiling melted upward into blackness. I realized then what the book had meant. The warnings, the words scratched by desperate hands. The room wasn't a room, it was a mouth. A trap set between places outside of time. That's why it wasn't on the map. That's why no one remembered. It existed to swallow people whole, lost travelers passing through. I fell to my knees as the floor beneath me rippled like water. Shapes moved under the surface, arms reaching, faces pressing against the thin layer of reality that separated me from whatever lay beneath. The shadow figure on the bed laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "It feeds," it whispered. "And it keeps feeding." The air grew hotter. The reflection leaned closer, its grin splitting wider until its jaw cracked unnaturally, stretching down its throat. I screamed, slamming my fists against the nailed curtains, desperate for an opening. The wood groaned under my weight, nails bending but refusing to break. Behind me, the breathing grew louder, closer. I turned just in time to see the bed sink inward, like something massive had climbed onto it. A weight pressed against the mattress, but nothing visible lay there. The sheets wrinkled, dipped, then lifted again as though something was crawling toward me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, this isn't happening." The reflection crouched beside me, its grin dripping into a parody of sympathy. "You checked in," it said. "Now you stay." The floor buckled, a wave rippling through the carpet. I scrambled to my feet, clutching at the curtains again, pulling until the nails tore loose. One gave way, then another. Behind me, the voices rose. Not just one, not just two, dozens, hundreds, all whispering my name in unison, filling the room with a chorus of stolen breath. "Stay," they hissed. With one last desperate wrench, the curtain ripped free. Behind it wasn't glass, but blackness. A void stretching into nowhere, cold air rushing through like the inhale of something enormous. I didn't think. I leapt. The air swallowed me whole. For a moment I felt weightless, tumbling through nothing. Then my body hit asphalt. I gasped, sucking in the sharp sting of desert night air. My car was there. The motel loomed behind me, silent, every window dark. The key to room 6 still burned in my hand. And for a moment, just a moment, I believed I'd escaped. I don't know how long I lay on that asphalt. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. My whole body shook, every muscle straining to convince me I was alive, that the solid ground beneath me was real. The night air felt sharper than it should have, each breath cutting through my lungs like glass. I looked up at the sky, wide and endless, scattered with stars. The silence of the desert pressed in, vast and empty, and behind me, nothing. The motel was gone. Where it should have been, there was only scrubland and dirt, the outline of the highway stretching into darkness. No neon sign, no lobby windows glowing, no line of doors, just emptiness. I staggered to my feet, swaying under the weight of confusion. My car was still there, sitting in the cracked parking lot as though nothing had happened. Keys still in my pocket, engine cold, a little slice of normalcy waiting for me. I almost laughed. I almost cried. I pressed my forehead against the roof of the car, clutching it like a lifeline. "I made it out," I whispered. "I'm out." The words tasted like hope. I slid into the driver's seat, fumbling with the ignition, my hands trembling too much to fit the key at first. When the engine finally roared to life, the sound was so normal, so ordinary that tears spilled down my cheeks. Headlights cut across the empty road. Nothing but open highway ahead of me. I should have driven. I should have slammed the gas pedal and never looked back. But something gnawed at me, a sliver of unease buried deep. I pulled out my phone instead. No signal. That wasn't surprising out here, not in the middle of nowhere. But the GPS worked, usually. I opened the map app, watching as it searched for my location. When it appeared, my stomach dropped. A single pin marked my position. Room 6, not the motel. Not a town. Not coordinates. Just those two words hanging on the screen like a sentence. I blinked, refreshed it, restarted the app. Each time, the same result. No matter how I moved, no matter how far I leaned the phone out the window, the pin didn't change. It stayed locked on me. Room 6. My hands went cold. I told myself it was a glitch, some leftover data scrambling the system. But the longer I stared, the harder it was to deny. I was still inside, or maybe room 6 was still inside me. The desert stretched endlessly in both directions, the highway a ribbon of black splitting the sand. No lights, no towns, no signs of life. Just me in the car and the faint hum of the engine. I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a second, I swore I saw it. The motel, its row of doors stretching into the dark. The neon sign sputtering against the sky. Room 6 gleaming faintly. Waiting. I whipped around. Nothing. Just dirt and scrub and empty air. But the key in my pocket burned hotter, like it was laughing at me. Like it was reminding me where I really was. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and told myself again, I made it out. But the words didn't taste like hope anymore. They tasted like a lie. I drove for hours that night, the headlights carving through the darkness like fragile threads of safety. I kept my eyes on the road, too terrified to look at the GPS again, too afraid that the words would still be there, tethering me to something I couldn't escape. But in the back of my mind, I knew it didn't matter. Whether the motel was gone or just hiding, whether the app was broken or honest, the truth was the same. I hadn't really left. You can't leave room 6. The desert rolled on endlessly, the same patches of dirt and rock repeating themselves like a broken reel of film. I kept telling myself that eventually I'd hit a town, a gas station, a sign of life. Hours passed. My fuel gauge dropped lower. Nothing. I pulled off the highway finally, too exhausted to go on, and parked on the shoulder. I told myself I'd just close my eyes for a few minutes, that I'd keep the engine running, that it was safe. I woke up in another parking lot. At first I thought my brain had snapped, but when I stepped out of the car I knew. Another motel. It looked different, 2 stories instead of 1. Paint faded blue instead of beige. But the feeling was the same. That heavy, suffocating stillness. No insects, no wind, no distant noise. Just silence, waiting for me. My stomach dropped when I realized I wasn't surprised. Inside the lobby, another clerk sat behind the counter. Not the same man as before, but close enough. He had the same dead-eyed stare, the same cigarette dangling between his fingers, the same air of someone who'd been sitting in that chair for longer than a human life should allow. I told myself I'd just ask for directions, just for gas. But the words caught in my throat as he slid a key across the counter toward me. Room 6, the number gleamed against the brass tag. My hand shook as I stared at it, refusing to touch. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to burn the place down and force the truth into the open. Instead, I backed away, mumbling something about having the wrong place the wrong time. His eyes followed me with an expression I couldn't read. I stumbled outside, desperate for air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Relief surged, finally service. Finally proof of the real world outside this nightmare. But when I opened it, my blood went cold. Notifications filled the screen. Comments. Dozens of them. They weren't texts from friends or alerts from apps. They were your words, "This can't be real." I stayed in a motel like this once. Dude, I think I've seen that door too. Stop telling this story. You're making it worse. I scrolled, my vision blurring, my heart hammering. The comments kept coming, new ones appearing even as I stared. Some of them mentioned things I hadn't said yet, things I hadn't told anyone. One read, "You're still in room 6, you never left." I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The screen kept glowing from the asphalt, more comments flowing across it like water spilling through a crack. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. Another one. "We can see you." I kicked the phone away, watching it skid into the shadows. I didn't chase it because I already knew. Room 6 wasn't a place you left behind. It followed, it grew, it spread into the cracks of the world, seeping into new motels, new towns, new lives. It was inescapable. And maybe that's why I'm telling you this now. Maybe some part of me thinks that if I warn you, if I put the weight of this horror into your hands, I'll be free of it. But the truth? I don't think anyone's free. Not me, not the others before me. Not you, because now you know. And once you know, it knows you too. I'm sitting in my car as I say this, parked outside that blue-painted motel. The key is still burning a hole in my pocket. The clerk is still watching me from the lobby window. And I can feel the weight of the door waiting, patient, inevitable. I don't know how much longer I can resist. My eyelids are heavy, and every time I blink, I see it. The room, the mirror, the grin that isn't mine. I hear the voices in the vent whispering my name, whispering yours. If you ever find yourself on the road, tired and desperate, looking for some place to rest, remember this. If you see a door that shouldn't exist, don't open it, don't even touch it, and if you do, if you can't help yourself, then I'm sorry. Because you've already checked in and no one checks out.